NOS4A22, Chapter 9, 1600 AD. Notes. In the 1600s, the Order of the Leech would return to Spain, taking a man named Carlos, who refused to fight with his country's marauding conquistador Christians in their conversion missions. Charlie Manx had the file in his possession of Aram the Leech. All that time he never bothered to read any more of the pages he could have kept his whole time, if he had chosen. Charlie had found all he needed in that one page, and never knew that this was a setup from the beginning. Thus his life. Charlie didn't understand why he dreamed of this finding of the files happening so much, always with different details missing, some added. He learned more and forgot less, he thought. What was actually happening was a carefully constructed reconstruction of his thinking, the way his mind works. Since Aram saw the shocking similarities between Abbas and himself, the takeover was too easy for the Leech. This is how Aram began to walk in different points in time at the same time. There is some humor here. His whole life, Charlie thought he was in control of his thoughts, even after learning young what power he was drawing the energy from. How naive could one be? Well, Aram loved this fact too much, and the ironic comedy here is the fact that Charlie Manx wasn't the only one being controlled, because, in fact, Aram was controlled straight from the power source itself. Charlie still is responsible for the things he did. The thing is, he knew a small portion of truth while being fed lies. This destroyed him as a person. Once Aram the Leech completed the task, there had been nothing left to do but sit back and watch from the comfort of their armchairs in Bizarro Paradise. And you can bet they did, those goddamned leeches. These are the people who we do not see often in passing for the average person, but even still, more often than you might imagine. If you ever feel weird or like someone is acting funny, then it is probably because they are completely cloaked, partially cloaked, or just in plain sight, looking suspicious and darkly ominous, while controlling others. Or they indeed are both controlled and being controlled. These are the many legions who traverse through the real world, real time, and enter the Bizarro Paradise that is the home of the Leech. It should not exist, yet there it is just behind what we see and know, in that perverse dreamland that is the Leech's home. These are the types of Nosferatu. Bad ghosts, the dead old spirits of demons and their vampiric children born from rape, who can no longer harm without doing their best to break through the vapor door of the unrealm. The Six. 3 men, 3 women, the highest being in a class all of his own, with each of his Leech disciples from the 400-year time gap. Children of the Leech, all the legions of kidnapped children who were chosen to be the Nosferatu. Then we have the strong creatives who never chose the ways of darkness as the Nosferatu. They are the ones who live a life of imagination as an artist. The life of the strong creative is not chosen because we cannot make this choice as a strong creative being born this type person, who can go beyond the physical limitations which set back every other type of person there is, every type of person out there in the seen world. Abbas is the one set aside from all the rest. Aram was and is yet not, because he is the leech and not able to attain anything but the blackest of hearts, the hardest of hearts. Abbas, even in this altered state of spiritual infection, is still able to come out of the darkness that blinds him. He is only trapped under the spell of sorts, with this dual mind control that is so complex it cannot be traced. The chain of command is directly from the source, so unfortunately, there is no chance of reaching the source without dying. Abbas has the potential to destroy the entire earth with the wishes of the leech. Abbas has the potential to bring down the order with the help of this woman, Fran, the woman who he came to be with. These are the paths. They've been chased for so long. It is all they know to do. With the help of Millie and Wayne, they can possibly defeat both split factions of the evil orders, both the leech and the Earth's beast. Abbas was in the forefront for a long time, while Abbas had to sit on the back burner for too many times he cared not to remember. When Abbas walked through to meet Fran through the gates, beyond the door that the leech had opened for him, Abbas was in the forefront. As soon as he saw her, there was no hold. Only in the moment, in the beginning of Aram's attacks, did Abbas feel strongly enough to be his true self. The attraction swept over him like opening an old cedar chest and being hit with the lovely, unescapable aroma of comfort and the sense of where he always was supposed to be. This was it for him. He knew that no matter what, this was his fate, and he truly was free in this moment, thinking for himself. The leech knew this would happen, and it was for the important decision to choose a true fate. The lie the leech told Abbas didn't matter. This had nothing to do with the experience and feelings he had at that moment. Here are some special details from the many accounts of Abbas and his newfound partner Fran, taken from their historical documents that have been miraculously saved from the evil order of leeches. We shall pick up where we left off now, since there are plenty of juicy nuggets for you little nuggets. Please forgive me. It's nice to have fun, isn't it? Abbas could not be present there beyond the door, although the receptors were charged and waiting for him to get back, just to be immediately taken over again. Aram the leech put in Abbas's mind the knife. This cannot be removed by another person who is a strong creative. No vampire, no good person like Vic. This was staying until he would die. Aram is going around stabbing people with the drainers that help feed the connected children. This is felt through his receptors in his mind, and it makes Abbas hurt. His pain is incredible, too, because the direct effect of the drainers that are being left inside the leech's victims are part of the knife material that is inside Abbas's head. The receptors are this kind of crown built around Abbas's mind. Aram the leech built this thing out of material forged in a mill in his imaginative dream world, come to life on the other side. As Abbas entered the foreign land, there was something in the air he never got to see before, floating like pollen almost, but pure white with no powder. These were beautiful crystallized particles of frozen water. Tiny and intricate, these boggled his mind as Abbas stopped in his tracks. There was a large bridge built of stone that had developed a nice dark green mossy mold. The stones were large and of granite rock. The air was colder than what he had experienced before, and it made him perk up with alertness. Not knowing exactly what he was looking for, Abbas stood for a good while to examine this phenomenon in the air. For people who have lived their lives in a hot desert, then a dream world where there are no uncomfortable temperatures, you can imagine his surprise. Abbas stood for a long while still contemplating all his life up to this point. The man was still a man, and he had been made to do many wicked things. He even took pleasure in killing, because he was brainwashed to believe his cause was righteous. Abbas had blood on his hands because of his supposed father. This father figure is not a father at all. Aram the Leech should go by the nickname some people have given him on their way out of this life, the anti-father. This is fitting and appropriate for such a sick devil. There is a long list of righteous qualities that Aram the Leech has taken away from people forever. As Aram took his own life to become the Leech, he would become the NOS4A22 that would take all things he desired, which he saw in others: love, innocence, youth, becoming old through life. Aram was now the taker and manipulator of all these things to self-serve his never-ending hunger. The hunger of the vampire is no different than the abyss. The bottomless pit is always hungry for one thing. No one should pretend they don't know, because then they will be showing themselves to be choosing ignorance of the whole of things. The only thing the source of the evil energy wants is the blood of the innocents. Blood of anyone satisfies them, but only in that very moment, anyone they can find. Then it's on to the next. Although Abbas had committed much senseless murder in the beginning, and would continue to do much more evil while mostly being controlled by the Leech himself, he still had a chance to do good, and to be good like Millie and Wayne, or anybody else with some light still left in him. With this thought, he knew it would be all he needed to endure. He found his light in that moment. As Abbas stared at the snowflakes unnamed in his mind, he saw a light shining through the patterns. The light mesmerized him. The golden light was the goodness that Aram knew would expose his true nature to Abbas through the receptors he installed through strong creative manipulation of matter. A strong creative must be directly connected to the source of evil to achieve this telepathic power, to communicate with living dark matter. Aram was kept outside this one and only portal he called a door, to grant Abbas the one and only chance he would be given in life. Abbas had a small window of time to be with his newfound love and express his true self to her. He knew he could not fail, even though he was unaware of the greatly evil hold Aram actually had of him, because Abbas was supposed to be his son. The fact that he was being called Abbas instead, and being taught this was the way, bothered him. So, with this small window of time, Abbas was gifted with this realization that would stay locked away in his mind for hundreds and hundreds of years. Standing under the dry bridge was where Abbas planted his feet, as he was struck with destiny. The love of his life, that even Aram the Leech, who was directly being controlled by the source of evil itself throughout the cosmos, could not stop this love and could not deny. So, with this story, we have love at the forefront yet again, on top of love that conquers, as it always does, when it is real and true. Then it surely is undying, no matter all the evil ones, through all the hidden places that are constantly at war with themselves, and everything's not serving them. Hate will always lose, as it always destroys itself. People who are the best examples of people who live their lives in undying love are the people like Vic and Lou, even Wayne's blood father Craig, who comes as a ghost to be a good spirit even still. Millie and Wayne in their new love, Maggie, and her love for doing what is right, that is a true conviction, and the epic long love story of Abbas and Fran. Abbas did all he could to establish this time of meeting in his mind so that it would never leave. He knew that he would have the most impossible trials, and although he was given a glimpse of truth, he was thrown right back in the darkness soon as he was able to find all he ever wanted. Abbas was thrown into darkness to suffer for more than what was fair, more than what any man deserves. This is the fate of the chosen. A life of suffering in the early years brings rewards. Maybe more often than not, the rewards are not in this life, although this is the goal anyway, for anyone who wants what's more important for the life's legacy. For it is not the spoils we seek as good doers, but the rewards for others we've positively affected before we leave the life to enter the place of ghosts where Vic dwells. Abbas was a man who was saved from a terrible fate, to be put into a much longer hell and entered a prolonged fate that consisted of a different kind of suffering. While entering 1600s France, Abbas realized all the evil he had done under the control of the leech. He did not recognize the full truth of anything that was happening to him directly from Aram, yet somehow an outside voice that was not a voice spoke to his heart as it was momentarily freed from the bonds of the NOS4A22. He was given all he could have ever wanted, but the stipulation was impossible because of the order of the leech, with their sucking grip around any decency to be had, sucking the life from anything and everything they could get their mouths on, in order to drain the body of any pure and vulnerable blood. These are the real vampires that are not what you will hear of through traditional stories, because the truth is too frightening. It is frightening enough to imagine vampires being controlled by some kind of Dracula. When you realize the truth behind these legends, you will find much more disturbing facts concerning the powers that be behind the scenes, with bad people in every single area and organization of elite society. The people calling the shots. The Nosferatu have psychic vampire holds on approximately every half to third of all seats of power throughout the world, from the smallest to the largest levels of power. These are the legions of the children of the leech. They are always draining, even when you don't know it. They can be your mother, your father, your brothers and sisters, best friends, enemies, strangers in passing, and the list goes on and on. The clerk at the store, the policeman at night, No one is safe. Anyone can be taken at any time to be killed by the order of the leech. Abbas had one chance to establish all he wants, although it would destroy him in the process. This is the terrible fate of many victims of evil. They are subjected to such evil that they are destroyed by that very same evil, even when virtually freed of it, simply because of the lasting damage. Abbas was put in the same place with his love. He looked at her through the small pieces of snow that came floating down like the most heavenly sight he had ever seen. If his feet were planted, you wouldn't have known it once he shook off the incredible force of being love-struck. Aram was hit with the most intense feelings he had ever felt when he saw Fran's face standing in the timid cold. She had a content grin that looked like a satisfied smile. After he was able to shake off the initial first glance while he was frozen in his tracks, Abbas jumped forward with a happy leap towards this lovely lady who caught his eye. Hi, Abbas came forward with an open hand in a short waving motion. Hello, mister. What is your name? Fran looked at him with a look that read through his entire soul. Abbas. My name is Abbas, not Abbas. I'm confused. I thought I would be coming to save you. I'm sorry, I mean another person being persecuted. You are mistaken. I've already been saved. Fran hit Abbas with a terrible, unsuspected surprise that threw off everything and no longer knew what to do. Abbas had dozed off standing up. He jumped out of his sleep and lunged forward to escape his dream that had turned into a nightmare, and in doing so, he fell in a hole under the bridge that went to the old crypts. The dry bridge he stood in had just a little water in the middle because the drain could not unclog. Fortunately, when Abbas fell in the hole, which was like a water pit, he was able to continue lunging forward through the water, avoiding the second lower chamber of the narrow hole that had the clogging. If he did not fall exactly and precisely how he fell out of that standing sleep while waiting, stuck mesmerized by the first sight of snowfall, Abbas would have never been able to narrowly escape the nightmarish, tangled, claustrophobic, trapped death just under his feet as they stepped forward while his strong arms swept him forward to swim between the chambers of death as the waters and the waters of life. Abbas swam until he reached the end, which was too long for him to hold his breath by about 20 seconds or so. This made Abbas make the decision to slowly exhale as long as he could until he began breathing in a little water. His lungs filled with water as his head came above the end of the waterway. He once again lunged forward, making himself do so that his head would surely make it out of harm's way. As long as I make it to where I won't slide back in the water, I might make it, he thought. Abbas did make it, by his shoulder even, so he wasn't going to slip in too easily unless something grabbed him and physically pulled him back in. He choked, hacked, and coughed until he saw sparks. The edges of his vision became black. The skin was tightening around his neck, and it crawled up to his head, tightening the skin around his skull. Abbas felt that he was getting tired and knew he could not go to sleep here. He had to fulfill his mission. Why was Abbas getting tired in the water? Can you guess? Yes, he was covered in leeches. The only place they weren't was the place he really was glad for, and that was only because he was wearing a special loincloth under his robe that was a strong sackcloth gently wrapped over the soft Persian silk covering his protected nether regions where the sun doesn't shine. Abbas began to muster all the energy he had to fight these leeches' grip through his exhaustion. He plucked and brushed them off from his skin until he was standing there hunched over, like a man who was still covered in thick black widow spider webs, although they had already been brushed off. Once he realized this, and that the leeches were off of his body, he said something out of relief that caught the ear of a marauding barbarian watchman. Abbas yelled a thing to make himself laugh. Why can't I find this woman to suck me right instead of these goddamn leeches sucking the life from me? Hey, who are you? The invader in the shadows yelled back at Abbas, but he stayed silent, not moving. Abbas waited for the sound of movement, and when he felt from the sound's vibrations that this hateful man was near enough for him to make his move, do or die, he did what he does best before he became a lover. He made his death strike quick and efficient. Abbas felt the man would be at a particular place, coming in the corridor arch, and sure enough, there he was. Abbas put his small dagger blade into the barbarian's neck, directly into the carotid artery, pushed the strong pointed blade to the spine, and slid the blade from the carotid to the jugular vein. The point of the double-edged dagger was embedded into the spine at the neck, and so when he twisted the blade to sever one artery to the next, the caught blade within the spinal column twisted and broke his neck while being halfway decapitated. The barbarian's neck looked like a new mouth, as if Abbas turned this hateful man into a Pac-Man chomper. The blood poured gloriously after it gushed like a geyser. Bubbles came out from the top of his stump with a gurgling foam as he tried to speak dying words of hate. Abbas put the bottom of his sandal on the dying man's chest under his neck to kick the corpse off his dagger. The piece of shit fell and clumped to the ground in such a pathetic sight. Abbas looked down at him in a pity and said, "You deserve the leeches. Suck 'em. Suck 'em to your heart's content, you little fucks." The man Abbas killed was the man who was looking out while his pack of marauding rapist beasts began to strip his love. He found them in a group, warming their hands and their cocks in their hands in a circle with a big patch fire to both keep them warm during this heinous act and to guard them from any attempts of a rescue for poor little Fran. Fran wasn't a weakling, no matter how small of a frame she had. She was tougher than the stones that held up her town. When Abbas saw that they actually had her hogtied as well, he went primal. Fran had her clothes ripped and her undergarments were used to tie her. Abbas took one split second to assess the situation and have his strikes planned out, dagger in hand. Abbas hit two men from behind at once, smashing one head into the other as the dagger penetrated the brain through the ear of this pigman barbarian. The two men wore pighead leather masks with their large beards flowing out from the pigs' necks. Those real pighead masks came flying off in either direction. The one from the man who was not stabbed in the ear had partially landed in the fire. As he tried to jump up to save himself, Abbas stomped him out into the trash fire while pulling out his dagger from the other bastard he just killed. The four other men were facing him clearly now, with their focus going from sickening lust to angry panic. Abbas saw their panic and used it to his advantage as their momentum failed at their own feet, these nasty barbarians. Abbas began stabbing at the other men until their blood was everywhere, and they dropped to the ground on their knees to be slaughtered like the pigs they were. Immediately, he began untying Fran, and she just looked up at Abbas and said, "Didn't you know by now? I'm already saved." Abbas woke to find Fran smiling with the same look, only tired and in their tent, awaiting to save another martyr in 1600 Spain.